What's up, guys? Back at it again with another episode of the Common Grounds podcast. Coming to you live today from the ZSR library. I'm here with my great friend, Robbie Barr. Robbie, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from? Where are you coming to us from today? Thank you for joining.
Hi, Alex. Again, thank you for having me on your show. So I'm from Glasgow, Scotland. I came to America back in 2016. I came here on a track and field scholarship, so that's how I found out about Wake Forest. So I was recruited to come over here, so I've been here ever since. I met my current wife, Emily. We were best friends our freshman year in Luther Hall, and then we were married back in 2020, and we currently live here in Winston-Salem currently, where she is a medical school student.
Congratulations. With your lovely dog, Winston, too.
Yeah.
Beautiful boy.
Yeah, I've got a yellow lab, Winston. He's almost 2, and I actually got a black Labrador puppy 2 days ago. His name is Boomer. So now we've got Winston and Boomer, both Labradors. So.
Yeah. For the people listening in, I've always had a connection with Robbie, even before I got to know him really well, because my great-grandfather is from his hometown, probably about 5 minutes away from where he grew up, and I always thought that was super interesting, because it's not every day that you come across people from Scotland. Usually you'll see people from England or maybe other big countries in Europe, but that's pretty crazy. Were you one of your only of your friend group, were you one of the only guys to decide to come to the U.S.? How did that work? How popular was that at the secondary school you went to?
So are you talking about from people from my high school? Or are you talking
high school, yeah.
High school. I don't know anyone that went anywhere outside of the UK for their undergraduate education. I know one girl who was in my class who she went to go study law in British Columbia up in Canada. But apart from that, I don't know anyone that's moved abroad. Everyone in Scotland usually just stays in Scotland, or if they're adventurous, they'll go down to England for a couple of years. But
would you say a lot went down to England for undergrad, or very few still?
So I went to a private school. I went to a good private school in Glasgow. So a lot of us got really good grades. And university in Scotland's completely free. If your family actually earn under a certain income, the government will pay you to go to university and give you a stipend every month. But because I went to private school, a lot of people were well off, so they could afford to go and pay tuition in England. But tuition in England was maybe only £7,000 or £8,000 a year, which works out at about $13,000. So that's really nothing to what people over here in America pay.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of get all the terms, they kind of throw them together and like, oh, Great Britain, UK, all that stuff, Scotland. So let's just clarify, UK for the viewers. I know the professor knows, but that consists of.
Okay, so there's the United Kingdom and Northern Ireland. Those are the 4 countries that make us up. United Kingdom is solely the main island, consisting of England, Scotland and Wales. Then also there's Northern Ireland, which is part of Great Britain also. But then there's also the Republic of Ireland, which is the majority of the Irish island.
Yeah, where my dad lived 4 or 6 years to get his medical degree. That's why I think part of that's rubbed off on me, the global experience. But how does that work where you pay taxes, but then, so that would be to go to a Scottish college. Can you talk about that process? So like you'd have a special, even though you're part of the UK, you'd have a special rate because you were a Scottish citizen first and foremost, or how does that work kind of?
So
it's a little bit complicated to explain.
Yeah, so it's quite complicated. So there is the UK national budget. The UK national budget goes towards the things which affect all of us. Really, that's only things like international relations and defence, but a lot of powers are held solely by Scotland. So when it comes to the police force, a lot of the law, healthcare, education, transport, all of those things, those are all solely controlled by the Scottish government.
I didn't know that.
So really what happens is everybody in the United Kingdom pays taxes, goes into a big pot, then that pot is divided between the 4 countries depending upon population and size. So each country gets to determine how they spend their own budget, and Scotland has decided to spend more of their budget on education, but less of their budget on things like, for instance, transportation or healthcare. I don't know if that's a fact, but that's just how they divide their money.
Do they have their own military, or is there one big?
No,
military?
it's just all one. So it's just the United Kingdom and Ireland. It's their Army, Air Force, Navy.
Wow.
It's all one.
Wow, that's incredible. That's incredible. Now I remember about 5 years ago, correct me if I'm wrong, probably a little bit longer, there was a movement for Scotland to kind of get out.
Yeah.
Okay, what was that about? Do you mind running us through that?
That was back in, I'm trying to remember this, I think it was 2014.
Oh, so you were still there.
Yeah, that was
8 years ago.
8 years ago now. Yeah, I was still in high school, and that was the independence referendum, where Scotland was voting to either leave the United Kingdom or stay, and it was a pretty tight vote. It was 55.2% to remain, and then whatever the opposite, 44.8% to leave. So Scotland voted to stay.
Yeah. You mind sharing your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I voted to stay with England and Wales and Northern Ireland. I definitely love Great Britain. My mother's English. She moved to Scotland when she was about 25, when she met my dad. But no, I've always been very proud of being British. I would say I'm British more so than Scottish.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of people don't feel that way. But it's just one of those things.
Yeah.
It's a really long. It's fiercely debated and contested back in Scotland, and the issue of independence comes up every couple of years or so, and there may be a future referendum, but for a referendum to happen, it has to be approved by the British Prime Minister, which is currently Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson has said that he does not want another referendum, especially seeing as how divisive they can be.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Great point that you bring up, and thank you for bringing this up, is kind of saying you consider yourself British before you consider yourself Scottish. Kind of there's a little bit of a hierarchy there, and that reminds me kind of, if we try to draw a comparison to America, the United States of America, that is, people having a tendency to just say, oh, I'm American, I'm from the United States, versus sometimes there seems to be a little bit of a less of a propensity to say, oh, I'm Floridian, or I'm Californian, or something like that. I'm very proud to be from Florida, and I always tell everyone I'm from Florida. But at the end of the day, I think they try to kind of group us all together, whereas maybe if you rewinded the clock and looked in the 1800s, everyone's screaming kind of their state and state name leading up to kind of when states would secede all the time and things like that, but I digress. But the next thing, speaking of kind of seceding and leaving unions and things like that, what do you think about just Britain, since you've Brexit and things like that? Could you maybe talk a little bit about that from your perspective? Because I really have no idea the ins and outs. All I know is just the term and basically what it means.
So again, this is a huge topic that could take up multiple podcasts. So yes, I was old enough to vote in the Brexit referendum, the British exit from the European Union. That vote was back in 2016, I believe, and Britain didn't actually officially leave the EU till I believe 2020, so it was a long process, seeing as how closely intertwined Britain had become with Europe, especially with regards to laws and regulations and finances and even defence in some cases. So it was a very long journey to actually leave the EU. Again, this is a debate that was held a lot back in the UK, and people still feel very strongly about whichever side they voted for. So I voted to leave the European Union. Again, I feel very British. I didn't feel as if Britain had to rely on being a member of the European Union, especially when certain European Union laws were able to supersede British laws. So in some cases, you had unelected officials from a multitude of countries, some that you'd never really even heard of, getting to vote on the matters occurred in your own country. I didn't think that was fair. I didn't think that was very democratic, and a lot of people seem to agree. So when the referendum happened, yes, Britain decided to leave, and that was an even closer referendum. I believe it was something only 51% decided to leave, 49% decided to stay. But again, it's one of these first past the post majority vote. So yeah, we decided to leave, and that caused a lot of controversy. Still causes a lot of controversy, but I believe we made the right decision in the long run.
Yeah, I think some of the good things that are touted are the freedom of movement, definitely to visit, but then there's always going to be economic travel, economic migration. Then some areas of the EU could definitely lose their workforce. Kind of, if we try to draw a comparison maybe to the United States, I know we talked in my Spanish class about Venezuela. A lot of their workforce has moved all around Latin America and to the United States because they're looking for economic opportunity, and that's even without the really green light from those countries to come. Sometimes they get refugee status, but say a worker from a poor EU country could come to another EU country, and that would leave that initially poor country without tons of workers. They just choose to leave somewhere else. So there's always the other side of the coin that I think people forget about is, well, that's great, your workers could go work somewhere else, but what about your home country and things like that? So what would you say, maybe not necessarily work because you've been over here for school, but holiday? Have you had a chance to travel around Europe? If so, what was that like, and how did it change your perspective?
Yeah, so I only ever really travelled around Europe on basic holidays. I never worked, I never studied abroad. I was always too young for that. When I went to some other European countries, it was great, it was fantastic, but again, it was just a holiday. Same as I would holiday over here in the US, where I came a couple of times. I had holidays in Florida growing up. So for me, it was never that much of an appeal. I'm terrible at learning any other language, so I always knew that I'd have to go to a primarily English-speaking country if I was going to survive and thrive. You made a point earlier about how economic migrants, that often seem the most popular choice for people moving around. When it came to the vote for Britain to leave the European Union, it was primarily the upper class and upper middle class, those who own businesses, who desperately wanted Britain to remain in the European Union, and they touted the benefits of the economy, having lots of workers. That was their main argument because it kept prices low. However, this meant that the individuals that they hired, it would be far less competitive for wages, and it would drive wages down, because you can have individuals coming from Eastern European countries, you can have individuals coming from Poland whose average wage was 1/8 of what the average British wage was. So obviously it's a gain for an individual to move from an Eastern European country to a Western European country. So for a lot of people, their wages were being driven down by foreign workers, and in a democracy, again, whichever side gets the most votes. So enough people felt this was unfair. That combined with having a lack of control over your own laws and systems. So those two factors combined forced Britain to leave.
Yeah, that's what they say about democracy, man. It's government of the people, by the people, for the people, but the people aren't always what you wanna.
Yeah,
the people aren't always the brightest, but that's okay.
It's
you don't always agree with the people.
Yeah, no, it's funny because that line you use, again, that's a line that individuals who think they're smarter than everyone, and when it doesn't go their way, they act angry and they call everyone else stupid and uneducated, and that is exactly what happened in 2016 for your presidential election. When Donald Trump won, a lot of people on the Democratic side were saying, oh, this is just uneducated people, they don't know what they're voting for, they've been fooled, they've been tricked, and they just put it down to basic stupidity or even sometimes racism to vote for another individual when not realising there are other external factors at play. So that was again one of the lines used by the individuals who wanted to remain in the EU. They called the individuals who wanted to leave racist, stupid, uneducated. So yeah, it's just funny seeing the similarities there between those two.
I only quote that line because it's not my own. It's from a famous viral video. But you got to take you got to preserve the institution of democracy. That's my personal belief. Whether it's for you, for the opinion you have, or against the opinion you have, you got to roll with it and just keep voting, and it all works out to the way that the people want, and that's the most important thing. But I like all those points you just made. Now let's talk a little bit about kind of that transition to the United States before we wrap up here, and transition to Wake Forest, and just kind of why Wake and how it was, and if there were any major culture shock points. And I believe you said it was the first time you came to the United States was when you showed up for Wake Forest. No, or am I thinking of something else?
No, sorry. The first time I came to North Carolina and Wake Forest was when I was starting in August back in 2016. I'd never visited Wake Forest. I'd only ever seen photos of it online. I'd gone through Google Maps, and I went and I walked around campus through Google Maps. But no, that was the closest I came to the university before signing up. But no, I've been to Florida a couple of times, and I think I'd been to New York when I was pretty young. But no, that was about it. In terms of why I came, back when I was 12, a former pupil of my school came back and gave a speech at an assembly of ours. We had assembly every morning. He came and gave a speech about his experience going to America. And previous to that, I'd never thought about university. It'd never been on my mind. It was just one of those things that was expected. And this individual had graduated maybe 5 or 6 years previously from my high school, went to go study law at Edinburgh University, because you can go study law, medicine, dentistry
right away,
straight away. So he studied law for a year at Edinburgh, decided it wasn't for him, didn't know what he wanted to do. So then he had the idea to go to NYU.
Oh, wow.
And I think he studied photography, so that's a huge shift from law to photography. He came back and gave a speech on why he did it, what his experience was like. And I was only 12 at the time, maybe 13, and I remember listening to him and thinking, that's exactly what I want to do. That very night I came back and I told my parents. I remember where I was standing, they were in the office, and I was talking to them. I said, this is what I want to do. And they kind of laughed and said, oh yeah, sure, yeah. Definitely not thinking this was going to come true at all. It's just one of those things a kid says. And from that moment on, I was completely focused on it. Realised if I wanted to go, and it cost a lot of money, I had to perform well in my sports to get a scholarship, and I was thankfully good enough to do that. So yeah, since I was 12, this was the goal, and I was never planning on staying in America. That was absolutely not my intention.
It just happens.
It just happens when you meet the person. And actually, my wife Emily, I tried to convince her to move back to Scotland because I just didn't have a plan to stay here in America. Not that I didn't like it, it just never occurred to me. But no, we decided it was better for both of us if we both stay here.
Mm-hmm.
She's in medical school right now, and doctors in America make a lot more money than anywhere else, especially Britain. So we thought it was the best thing for both of us to stay here. In terms of culture shocks,
maybe finding community. Do you think you found your community at Wake? I know you found your wife, but
yeah, no. In terms of community, again, I was on the track and field team, so that's the group of friends from day one, and I've stayed in contact with a lot of them. A lot of them were at my wedding. Of my 4 groomsmen, 3 of them were on the track and field team with me at Wake, and they're all great boys. So in terms of culture shock, there was nothing really that really stood out to me, especially on a college campus, because the college campus is its own kind of ecosystem. It's not the real America, it's the dressed up, everyone's paying 70 grand to live in a luxurious 1,600 acre campus here. So no, it's not the real America experience, but again, absolutely love the country. I'm so grateful and happy that I'm going to get to stay here, especially coming from a country where the weather is dreadful and rainy and cold and dark a lot of the year. Getting to live in North Carolina where it's sunny, it's warm, it's fantastic. Even the ability to walk out of the house in wearing shorts, that doesn't happen in Scotland. I'm wearing shorts now. You're wearing shorts.
Yeah. That's crazy. I never thought it was that cold, but it gets cold the further north you go.
Yeah, it's actually, if you look how north we are, Scotland is more northern than any major Canadian city. But it's not as cold as those bits of Canada because we're so close to the coast, and the Atlantic currents keep us warmer. Now it's not warm, but it's certainly warmer.
Not freezing.
So
it would be like 40 all year, probably.
Yeah, I would say for the winter, it never gets brutally cold. So in terms of Fahrenheit, again, I'm still not very good with Fahrenheit. What's freezing in Fahrenheit? 33, 32?
Yes.
Yeah. So 32. Yeah. The coldest I would have ever seen it would maybe have been 10 in the dead of winter, but that was quite rare. Mm-hmm. In the summer,
would it snow at all? Or?
Yeah, it would snow, but because it's so wet, the snow never really lies. So you might only get a good snow once every 2 years, once every 3 years. Maybe more up north in Scotland you get more, but where I was in Glasgow, that's kind of in the lowest parts of Scotland, down towards the border with England. But no, just talk about culture. One of the things that surprised me, and I really like, is how proud a lot of Americans are. Now, not all Americans, but how proud they are of being an American, in that sense of nationalism and patriotism. I really like that. I'm proud to be from Britain, so I really like it when I see Americans who are proud to be American and proud to stand up for their values and their culture. So that's one thing that I really, really appreciate. And especially, again, it's a different culture being in the south or the north or the east or the west. But I really like the southern culture, laid back, slower, more people are friendly, more people are polite. I really appreciate that, so that's why I really like it down here.
Yeah, I think that's a great note to wrap it up on. Robbie, thank you. I've always looked up to you as a role model. You're 2 years older than me in school, still 2 years older than me, but 2 years ahead of me in school. Really took me under your wing on the track team, and just been great to keep connected with you. You've been over to my house back home, and I've always valued what you say, but I especially value the contributions that we get to share with everyone through this podcast. So I think we've definitely found common ground like we've always had, but I'll let you have the last word. If not, to wrap it up, I'll let you take it.
Yeah, Murphy, again, thank you for having me, and again, if there's anyone in this podcast listening who's maybe wants to know more about Britain or Scotland, please reach out to Murphy, and he'll pass on all of my information. So again, thanks for having me, and all the best.
Thank you. We're out.